Nikolai Ivanovich Kuznetsov, a name that during his lifetime and after his death became synonymous with unparalleled courage, iron will, and the highest professionalism. He not only entered history as an outstanding Soviet intelligence officer and saboteur, but also became a living symbol of resistance to the Nazi occupiers, the personification of heroism and self-sacrifice for the sake of the motherland. His exploits, carried out behind enemy lines, are striking in their audacity, composure, and effectiveness. Kuznetsov, possessing a unique talent for reincarnation and phenomenal linguistic abilities, managed to infiltrate the highest echelons of German power, obtain crucial information, and carry out a series of high-profile acts of retribution. His biography is not just a chronicle of one man's life, it is a vibrant page in the history of the Great Patriotic War, an example of how an ordinary Ural guy, tempered by hardship and devoted to his ideals, became a legendary agent whose name still evokes admiration and pride today. He became a hero because in the most difficult times, he showed what a person fighting for freedom and justice is capable of, becoming a true ghost for his enemies and a hope for his people. Nikolai Ivanovich Kuznetsov was born on July 27, 1911, in the small village of Zyryanka, Perm Governorate, now Sverdlovsk Oblast, into a peasant family. The Urals, with its harsh climate and industrial landscapes, forged the character of the future intelligence officer from an early age. The Kuznetsov family was large, hard-working, and friendly. His father, Ivan Pavlovich, was a hereditary peasant, and his mother, Anna Petrovna, took care of the household and raised the children. Kolya was the third child in the family. From childhood, he was distinguished by curiosity, wit, and an incredible thirst for knowledge. Nikolai received his primary education in the local parochial school, where he quickly demonstrated his aptitude for languages. He then entered the Talitsky Forestry College, where he studied forestry and qualified as a forest surveyor. It was here, at the college, that his multifaceted character began to form. He actively participated in public life, was a Komsomol activist, and was keen on sports, especially gymnastics and shooting. He was the life of the party, easily made friends, had a great sense of humor and infectious energy. However, not everything was smooth in his youth. In 1929, he was expelled from the Komsomol and dismissed from the college due to his allegedly hidden kulak origin. This episode became a serious test for young Kuznetsov, but it did not break him. It only strengthened his desire to prove his loyalty to the motherland. He found work as a forest surveyor and then entered the Sverdlovsk Industrial Institute, where he continued his studies. During this period, Kuznetsov actively engaged in self-education, particularly deep dive.
Even in his youth, Nikolai Kuznetsov possessed qualities that were extremely valuable for intelligence work. His unique abilities could not go unnoticed by Soviet special services, who were always on the lookout for talented and unusual individuals. Kuznetsov's first contacts with state security agencies, according to some reports, began as early as the 1930s. He was not just an informant, but rather a person who, due to his active civic stance and sharp mind, assisted in uncovering various crimes and identifying undesirable elements, which was especially relevant in the pre-war years. The key factor that drew the attention of the special services to Kuznetsov was his phenomenal knowledge of languages, primarily German. He not only spoke it conversationally, but also spoke practically without an accent, mimicking various dialects and intonations. This was the result not only of natural talent, but also of persistent, many years of work. Nikolai literally lived the German language, listened to German speech, read books, newspapers, and studied cultural characteristics. He could easily maintain a conversation on any topic, quote German poets and philosophers, and joke in German, which made him absolutely unrecognizable to native speakers. This skill was invaluable for working behind enemy lines. In addition, Kuznetsov possessed a unique, truly phenomenal memory. He could memorize vast amounts of information, faces, names, dates, numbers, details of surroundings at first glance, and reproduce them with astonishing accuracy. For an intelligence officer who had to work in conditions of constant risk, where every trifle could cost a life, such a memory was vital. He could remember not only the content of a conversation, but also the intonations of the interlocutor, their manners, gestures, which allowed him to later reproduce what he heard in detail and draw correct conclusions. Another outstanding trait of Kuznetsov was his amazing ability to transform. He was a born actor, able to fully immerse himself in a role. This was not just an external change, a change of clothes or hairstyle. It was a complete immersion in the role, down to the smallest detail. He changed his gait, voice, manners, gaze, and even way of thinking, fully identifying himself with the character. He could be a charming German officer, an arrogant aristocrat, a simple peasant, or an intelligent engineer. This ability allowed him to easily penetrate various social strata and gain the trust of very different people. He studied the psychology of his characters, their habits, their attitude towards life, which made his performance absolutely convincing. For intelligence work, where every contact could be fateful, such flexibility was invaluable. Special courses, mastering skills of conspiracy, interrogation, weapon use. Recognizing his unique abilities, the special services decided on his specialized training. In the late 1930s, Kuznetsov was sent to secret courses at the Registration Directorate, later the Main Intelligence Directorate or GRU of the General Staff of the Red Army. There he underwent intensive training, which included a wide range of disciplines necessary for working behind enemy lines. He mastered the skills of conspiracy, learned to act covertly, imperceptibly, leave false trails, and avoid surveillance. He was taught the basics of cryptography, radio communication, and agent work. Special attention was paid to psychological training.
In addition, the program included training in interrogation techniques. He was taught how to extract information, ask leading questions, read facial expressions and gestures, and detect lies. This part of the training was especially important, as his task was not only to gather information, but also to obtain it from enemy officers without arousing suspicion. During his training, Kuznetsov demonstrated not only his natural talents, but also astonishing discipline, perseverance, and determination. He was ready for any challenges and understood the full responsibility of the upcoming work. Having completed the courses, Nikolai Ivanovich Kuznetsov was ready to become what he was destined to be, a legendary Soviet intelligence officer. Behind the mask of a cool-headed intelligence officer, a masterful saboteur, and a ruthless avenger lay a man with his own hobbies, principles, and character. Outside of his assignments, Nikolai Ivanovich Kuznetsov was completely different. He was a versatile man with a rich inner world who valued friendship, art, and simple human joys. One of Kuznetsov's striking qualities was his amazing sense of humor. He loved to joke, easily maintained conversation, and was the life of the party. His jokes were sharp, but never mean. They helped to diffuse tension and create a relaxed atmosphere. This quality, incidentally, also helped him in his work, allowing him to more easily make contact with people and gain their trust. Kuznetsov was an intelligent and educated man. He read a lot and was interested in history, literature, and philosophy. He was well versed in classical music and loved opera. Despite his busyness and constant danger, he always found time for self-improvement. His broad knowledge and cultural horizons allowed him to maintain conversations on a wide variety of topics, which was especially important when interacting with German officers, many of whom were educated people. He was very attentive and sensitive to those around him. His comrades in the detachment recalled that he always tried to support, advise, and cheer up in difficult moments. There was no arrogance or haughtiness in him despite his outstanding abilities. He was simple in communication, open and friendly. Kuznetsov treated women with great respect, was gallant and polite, which also helped him in some operations. At the same time, he was a principled and uncompromising man on matters of justice and duty. He hated injustice, lies, and hypocrisy. His devotion to the motherland was unwavering, and he was ready to make any sacrifices for its defense. These deep convictions were the driving force behind all his exploits. Kuznetsov was very observant. He noticed the smallest details in people's behavior, their clothing, speech, which later helped him create convincing images and identify potential threats. This observation was combined with an analytical mind, allowing him to quickly process information and make correct decisions.
He also distinguished himself by incredible discipline and self-control. Even in the most critical situations, he remained calm, his mind clear. This ability to control his emotions was one of the main reasons for his success in intelligence activities. June 1941 burst into the peaceful life of the Soviet Union with thunder and fire. Villages blazed on the border, and in cities still reeling from the initial shock, reports of the enemy's advance sounded. The German Wehrmacht, advancing swiftly and mercilessly, pushed deep into the country, sweeping everything in its path. The front line stretched for thousands of kilometers, and every Nazi victory resulted in new losses for the Red Army. In these difficult days, when the fate of the country hung in the balance, the need for accurate and up-to-date information about the enemy became particularly acute. The overall situation on the fronts was extremely tense. Troops suffered huge losses, retreated, and were often encircled. Under these conditions, traditional intelligence methods, such as frontline reconnaissance or interrogation of prisoners, were insufficient. Information about enemy plans, movements, headquarters locations, depots, airfields, troop strength, and morale was vital. Such information could only be obtained from deep behind enemy lines, by infiltrating agents capable of operating autonomously, gathering intelligence, and transmitting it to the mainland. This was precisely the task facing the state security agencies of the USSR. One such agent, destined to carry out an incredibly dangerous and responsible mission, was Nikolai Ivanovich Kuznetsov. A man with an amazing destiny and unique abilities, he already had experience working undercover, masterfully fluent in German, and possessing a phenomenal ability for transformation. He was to become Paul Siebert, an Oberleutnant of the Wehrmacht, an officer who was to become one of them among the enemies. The legend of Paul Siebert was developed with extreme care. Every detail of his biography, every element of his image was meticulously thought out to exclude the slightest suspicion. Paul Siebert was presented as a native of Saxony, from a family with long military traditions. His biography included points about studying at a gymnasium, serving in the army even before the war began,
and participating in the Polish and French campaigns. It was important to consider the characteristics typical of German officers: arrogance, punctuality, discipline, as well as a certain disdain for Untermenschen, the peoples of Eastern Europe. To create a convincing image of Siebert, Kuznetsov not only studied the German language down to the smallest nuances of dialects, but also learned German etiquette, manners, gait, and gestures. He learned to smoke German cigarettes, drink German beer, and even joke in German.
Special attention was paid to the uniform and attributes. A carefully selected Oberleutnant's uniform, insignia, awards, even personal belongings, everything had to be impeccable. An important detail was a set of documents confirming his identity. A military ID, identity card, driver's license, all of which were made with astonishing accuracy. Even such details as food preferences, favorite car brands, and attitude towards music were thought out in his legend. All this helped him to be convincing in any situation, regardless of whether he was communicating with ordinary soldiers or high-ranking officers. Nothing should have raised doubts about his true affiliation. Preparation for the mission was grueling, but Kuznetsov understood that not only his life, but the fates of many people, and possibly the course of the war, depended on its success. He was ready for the challenges.
Operation Polizeian Morning entered its decisive phase. After months of intense preparation, Kuznetsov, having fully transformed into Oberleutnant Paul Siebert, was ready to be dropped into Rovno, a city that had become one of the most important administrative centers of occupied Ukraine, the residence of Reichskommissar Erich Koch. The choice of Rovno was no accident. Major German headquarters, security services, and important information flowed here. It was an ideal springboard for agent work. The drop operation itself was fraught with enormous risks. In conditions of total war and fierce partisan resistance, the sky over the occupied territories was constantly patrolled by German fighters. Any suspicious aircraft could be shot down. It was decided to carry out a parachute drop as part of a small reconnaissance and sabotage group. On the night of July 27, 1942, a Soviet aircraft, having overcome the front line and enemy air defense zones, reached the designated area. On board the plane, Kuznetsov, dressed in an Oberleutnant's uniform, felt a mixture of excitement and determination. Every step, every decision he made on the ground had to be impeccable. After parachuting, he landed in a dense forest where liaisons were waiting for him, members of a partisan detachment warned in advance of his arrival. The first minutes on occupied soil were filled with nervous tension. The slightest mistake, any random patrol could lead to mission failure. However, everything went smoothly. The partisans quickly provided him with civilian clothes, hid the parachute, and provided the necessary assistance. After a brief briefing and exchange of information, Kuznetsov Siebert headed to Rovno. He entered the city as an ordinary German officer returning from a short leave or heading to a new duty station. The first days in Rovno were devoted to legalization, finding housing, getting acquainted with the city, observing the daily life of the occupation authorities. He deliberately chose places where German officers most often gathered: cafes, restaurants, officers' clubs. It was here, in a relaxed atmosphere, that the first useful acquaintances could be made. From the very first days of his stay in Rovno, Kuznetsov Siebert launched active intelligence activities. His main task was to gather valuable information about enemy plans, strategic intentions, and tactical decisions. Thanks to his impeccable German, manners, and convincing legend, he quickly made acquaintances, gaining the trust of German officers of various ranks. He listened carefully to conversations, noticed details, and analyzed snippets of information.
Among the most valuable intelligence obtained by Kuznetsov were data on major military operations being prepared at the front. He learned about troop transfers, the concentration of tank and artillery formations, and offensive plans. This data was immediately transmitted to the center through liaisons, which allowed the Soviet command to prepare in advance for enemy attacks and organize effective defense or counteroffensive. Kuznetsov paid special attention to information about new types of weapons and military equipment. He learned about the characteristics of new tanks, aircraft, and artillery systems that were being tested or were just entering service with the Wehrmacht. He once managed to obtain information about secret plans for the construction of underground fortifications and bunkers, which was of great importance for future offensive operations of the Red Army.
In addition to gathering information, Kuznetsov-Siebert actively established contacts with high-ranking German officers. He understood that the higher the rank of the officer, the more valuable information he possessed. He skillfully used his communication skills, charm, and cunning to gain the trust of such persons. He skillfully maintained conversations on topics of interest to his interlocutors, showed understanding of their problems and sympathy for their hard service. Thus, he managed to get close to Major Josef Kamphoff, personal adjutant to Reichskommissar Koch, as well as other important figures in the German occupation administration and the SS. These contacts opened doors to closed institutions, allowing him to obtain information that was inaccessible to most. Every new acquaintance, every new contact was a step towards new, even more valuable information. In addition to gathering valuable intelligence data, Kuznetsov-Siebert's activities in Rovno also included active sabotage work aimed at disrupting the activities of the occupation authorities and carrying out acts of retribution. The center tasked him not only with obtaining information, but also with inflicting significant damage to the enemy in his own rear. Kuznetsov understood that each such action was not only a blow to the Nazis, but also a powerful signal to the local population, a symbol that resistance was alive and retribution was inevitable. Preparation for sabotage acts required exceptional caution and meticulousness. Each operation was carefully planned. The victim's movement routes, security features, schedules, and possible escape routes were studied. Kuznetsov used his extensive connections and access to information to obtain the necessary information in advance. He was assisted by reliable liaisons from among local residents and underground fighters who knew the city and the situation like the back of their hand. The first major action, developed and successfully carried out by Kuznetsov, was the assassination of senior counselor Dr. Gall, head of the legal department of the Reichskommissariat, Ukraine. Gall was one of the active proponents of Nazi occupation policy, responsible for creating punitive laws and sentencing thousands of innocent people. The operation was planned with jeweler's precision. Kuznetsov, using his legend, had learned Gall's route of travel in advance. On September 20th, 1942, after tracking Gall, Kuznetsov, in the uniform of Oberleutnant Siebert, approached him on the street. A short, silent shot, and one of the executioners of the Ukrainian people was dead. This action, like the subsequent ones, had a bombshell effect in Rovno. The German authorities were furious. The search for the killer was conducted everywhere, but Oberleutnant Siebert remained above suspicion, as his identity was impeccable. This was followed by the assassination of the Vice-Governor of Galicia, SS Obergruppenführer Otto Bauer, and the Chief of Staff of the Eastern Troops, General Knut. Each of these operations was carefully planned, demonstrating Kuznetsov's audacity and professionalism. He could appear in the most unexpected places, using his position to approach the victim. The elimination of these high-ranking officials of the occupation administration not only dealt a serious blow to the Nazi apparatus, but also sowed panic in the ranks of the German command. No one could feel safe, even behind the strong walls of the headquarters.
In addition to the physical elimination of enemies, Kuznetsov waged a subtle but effective psychological war. His actions were aimed at sowing panic, fear, and insecurity in the ranks of the occupation authorities and Wehrmacht soldiers. The very facts of daring assassinations of high-ranking officials in the center of the occupied city were already a powerful tool of psychological pressure. The Germans could not understand who was behind these actions, and this gave rise to rumors about the existence of a powerful underground, about an invisible enemy among them. Kuznetsov skillfully used his role as one of their own among the Germans to spread rumors and disinformation. In conversations with officers, he could casually mention the unreliability of the Guard, the gaps in the security system, or the increased activity of the partisans. He emphasized that the enemy, Soviet agents and partisans, possessed extraordinary abilities and was everywhere. These accidental remarks, coming from one of their own officer, were perceived as reliable information and quickly spread, undermining morale and sowing distrust. He also used the tactic of leaving traces after each operation, or even simply to demonstrate his presence. He could leave notes or symbols indicating that it was the work of Soviet avengers. This enhanced the effect of uncertainty and fear, making the Germans feel in constant danger. Thus, Kuznetsov not only eliminated specific enemies, but also undermined the Germans' confidence in their own security and control over the occupied territories. The first months of Nikolai Kuznetsov's work in Rovno, under the guise of Oberlieutenant Paul Siebert, were marked by outstanding success.
Oberleutnant Siebert introduced himself, presented his documents, and politely but firmly demanded that the general present his. This was a diversionary tactic. While the general and his adjutants were disoriented, the group's fighters, acting swiftly and silently, neutralized the security. The general was stunned, but resistance was futile. He was quickly taken to the agreed-upon location where a car was waiting to transport him to the partisan detachment. Everything took no more than a few minutes. Not a single shot, no noise. The Germans searched for him throughout the district for a week, understanding nothing. General von Ilgen was successfully delivered to the partisan detachment, where he was interrogated for several days. The information obtained from him proved to be extremely valuable. Data on the state of German army supplies, reserve movements, and planned operations. This data was immediately transmitted to Moscow and helped the Soviet command adjust its strategic plans. In addition to abducting von Ilgen, Kuznetsov repeatedly attempted to assassinate Reichskommissar of Ukraine, Erich Koch, one of the most brutal and hated leaders of the occupation administration. The motive for these assassination attempts was not only Koch's strategic importance as a key link in the Nazi administration, but also the symbolic significance of his elimination. Koch's liquidation would have been a powerful blow to the morale of the occupiers and would have inspired millions of oppressed people. Kuznetsov made several attempts to assassinate Koch using various methods. In one case, he tried to plant a delayed action mine in his residence. In another, he planned an ambush for his motorcade. However, Koch was extremely cautious, had enhanced security, and constantly changed his travel routes. Despite the fact that these assassination attempts were unsuccessful, they kept Koch in constant tension, forcing him to live in fear and take unprecedented security measures which undoubtedly hindered his work. Besides Koch, Kuznetsov also successfully eliminated other high-ranking officials, such as the Reichskommissariat's judge, Alfred Funk. He was shot by Nikolai Kuznetsov in the Rovno courthouse on November 16, 1943. Finance Department head, Hell, and others. Each such action had far-reaching consequences. Here's how it was analyzed in one of the reports to the center from Kuznetsov's curators. 28 February 1944. Liquidation of Hans Hell. Consequences: chaos in the financial department. The appointment of a new person took weeks, and he did not immediately get up to speed. This creates a temporary vacuum that we can use. The main thing is demonstration. They understand that no one is protected. Every blow of ours is a crack in their confidence. The motives for these actions were multifaceted. Disorganization of administration. The elimination of key figures paralyzed the work of the occupation administration, creating chaos and slowing down decision-making.
Psychological pressure. Intimidation of the occupiers, undermining their confidence in their own security. This sowed panic and demoralized personnel. Retribution. Punishment of those guilty of crimes against the Soviet people. Support for resistance, demonstrating to the local population that the struggle continues and victory is possible, inspiring them to resist. The consequences were significant. Each liquidation was accompanied by an increase in terror on the part of the Germans, but at the same time led to a deepening crisis in their administration and an increase in fear among the occupiers. The actions of Kuznetsov, like those of other Soviet.
This information, along with data from other agents, allowed Soviet and British special services to prevent the assassination attempt and ensure the security of the historic Tehran Conference, where crucial decisions on the further course of the war were made. Kuznetsov also continued to actively collect information about new types of German weaponry. His dispatches contained descriptions of new models of tanks, aircraft, and artillery systems, including even prototypes of jet weapons that were being developed in Germany. This data allowed Soviet designers and strategists to prepare in advance for encounters with new threats and develop countermeasures. For example, he transmitted data on the heavy Tiger and Panther tanks, which helped the Soviet side develop tactics for combating them. By early 1944, as the Red Army actively advanced into right bank Ukraine, Kuznetsov's activities became even riskier. The front line was approaching Rovno, and the need for his work there diminished. He was ordered to move to the western regions of Ukraine, closer to Lviv, where a new phase of intelligence work was to begin. Nikolai Kuznetsov's last operation began in March 1944. He was heading west as part of a small group, continuing to carry out intelligence tasks. The circumstances of his death are still a subject of discussion and various versions, which underlines the heroic and dramatic nature of his final mission. The most common version states that on March 9, 1944, Kuznetsov's group in the village of Boratin, Brody district, Lviv region, encountered a unit of the Ukrainian Insurgent Army, UPA, who mistakenly took them for German officers. In the ensuing battle, Kuznetsov and his companions were surrounded. Realizing the hopelessness of the situation, Kuznetsov detonated a grenade to avoid capture and revealing valuable information. In another version, less common but with some indirect evidence, it is stated that Kuznetsov might have been killed in a battle with a German patrol that accidentally discovered his group. An analysis of the events shows that regardless of the exact circumstances, Kuznetsov's death was a tragic outcome of his incredibly dangerous mission. He died as a hero, fulfilling his duty to the last minute. His body was found only in 1959. Forensic examination confirmed that he detonated a grenade. The feat of Nikolai Ivanovich Kuznetsov forever entered the history of the Great Patriotic War.
He was posthumously awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union. His name became a symbol of fearlessness, devotion, and the highest professionalism of Soviet intelligence. In honor of Kuznetsov, numerous monuments have been erected in various cities of Russia and Ukraine. One of the most famous is in Rovno, where he operated, and in Lviv, where he died.
His personal belongings, documents, and materials related to his activities are stored in museums, including the State Museum of the History of the Great Patriotic War in Kyiv, now the Museum of the History of Ukraine in World War II, and in museums in his hometown. Feature films have been made about Kuznetsov, such as Secret Agent, 1947, and Strong in Spirit, 1967, as well as many documentaries. Books have been written, including the well-known biography It Was in Rovno by Dmitry Medvedev, his direct superior. The legacy of Nikolai Kuznetsov serves as an example for many generations, demonstrating what a person who dedicated his life to defending the fatherland is capable of. His name remains alongside the greatest heroes of intelligence, whose exploits often remain unseen, but are of immense importance for the fate of the country.